You walk through your front door, the same door you've opened 1,000 times. But tonight, something feels off. The walls are the same. The furniture hasn't moved. But the air feels different, heavy, foreign, like you're standing in a stranger's home. Ibn Arabi called this the awakening displacement. The moment your soul outgrows the life your body still lives in, this feeling doesn't announce itself. It arrives quietly, almost politely. You're going through your routine, the same route to work, the same coffee shop, the same conversations. Everything is where it should be. But you're not. Something inside you has shifted, and suddenly the world you built no longer fits. Ibn Arabi wrote about this centuries ago. He described it as the soul's recognition, a moment when your inner self realizes it has changed, while everything around you has stayed the same. It's not the place that became strange. It's you who became different. And now you're walking through a life that was designed for someone you no longer are. Most people feel this and panic. They think something is wrong with them. They try to force themselves back into the old rhythm, convince themselves it's just a phase, just stress, just exhaustion. But the feeling doesn't leave. It sits there, quiet and persistent, like a guest who won't take the hint. You look at your bedroom, and it feels like a hotel room. You sit at your dining table and wonder whose life this belongs to. You scroll through old messages and can't remember why those conversations mattered so much. The distance isn't physical. It's deeper. It's the distance between who you were and who you're becoming. Ibn Arabi said that when the heart evolves, the body takes time to catch up. Your soul has already moved on, but your life hasn't. You're still showing up to the same places, seeing the same people, playing the same role. But inside, you've already left. You're just going through the motions, hoping the feeling will pass. But it doesn't pass. It grows. There's a specific kind of loneliness that comes with this. You're surrounded by the familiar, yet you feel isolated. Not because people don't care, but because they're still relating to the version of you that lived here comfortably. They don't see that you've outgrown the script. They don't notice that your smile is polite but distant, that your laughter is automatic but hollowed out, and the worst part? You can't explain it. How do you tell someone that home doesn't feel like home anymore when nothing has changed? How do you say that the life you worked so hard to build now feels like a costume you're tired of wearing? They'll tell you to be grateful. They'll remind you of all the things you have. And they're not wrong. But they're not right either, because this isn't about what you have. It's about what you've become. And what you've become no longer aligns with where you are. Ibn Arabi described this as sacred estrangement. It's not depression. It's not dissatisfaction. It's the soul's way of saying, this place, these people, this version of life, it served its purpose. But that purpose is complete. And now you're being called somewhere else. Not necessarily a physical somewhere, but an internal one. You start noticing things you never noticed before. The way certain conversations drain you. The way certain routines feel mechanical. The way certain relationships exist only because they always have, not because they still nourish you. Everything that once felt solid now feels flimsy. Like you're living in a stage set, and someone just turned on the lights. This is when people usually make drastic changes. They quit their jobs, end relationships, move cities. Not because those things were bad, but because staying feels unbearable. The pressure of pretending everything is fine when your soul is screaming for something different. It becomes too much. But Ibn Arabi warned against rushing. He said that the displacement comes first as discomfort, then as clarity. If you act too quickly, you might just replicate the same feeling in a new place. Because the problem isn't the location. It's the misalignment between your inner truth and your outer life. The familiar becomes strange when you are no longer the person who found comfort in it. That coffee shop you loved? You loved it because of who you were when you first walked in. That friend group you cherished them because they reflected something back to you that felt true at the time. But if you've changed, if your values have shifted, if your priorities have evolved, then those reflections no longer match. And suddenly, what once felt like home feels like a memory. There's a photo on your wall. You put it there years ago. It's a good photo. Happy faces. A moment frozen in time. But now when you look at it, you feel nothing. Not sadness. Not nostalgia. Just nothing, because the person in that photo, the one smiling so easily, feels like a stranger. Ibn Arabi called this the death of the former self. Not a literal death, but an internal one. The shedding of an identity that no longer serves. And this shedding is uncomfortable, because identity is how we orient ourselves. It's how we know who we are in relation to everything else. When that identity dissolves, even slightly, the world tilts. The familiar becomes unfamiliar. The safe becomes uncertain. And you're left standing in the middle of your own life, feeling like a guest. Most people try to numb this feeling. They distract themselves, fill their schedules, stay busy, stay loud, anything to avoid the quiet moment when the strangeness returns. But Ibn Arabi said that the strangeness is not the enemy. It's the messenger. It's your soul telling you that something has shifted and it's time to pay attention. There's a version of you that still goes through the motions. Gets up, goes to work, smiles at the right times, says the right things. But there's another version, deeper down, that's watching all of this with detached curiosity. That version knows the performance is almost over. It's just waiting for you to realize it too. You walk past a mirror and catch your own reflection. For a second, you don't recognize yourself. Not because you've changed physically, but because the person staring back feels unfamiliar. Like meeting an old friend and realizing you have nothing left to talk about. Ibn Arabi said this is the moment of reckoning, when the inner self and the outer life can no longer pretend to be aligned. Some people spend years in this liminal space, caught between the life they're living and the life they're being called toward. They know something needs to change, but they don't know what. Or worse, they know exactly what needs to change, but they're terrified to do it. Because change means loss. And even when what you're losing no longer serves you, loss still hurts. Ibn Arabi taught that this tension is sacred. It's not meant to be resolved quickly. It's meant to be felt, to be sat with, to be honored, because in that tension lives the truth of who you were, who you are, and who you're becoming. And rushing through it means missing the lesson. The places that feel strange now once felt like home because they matched who you were. Your apartment felt cozy because you were someone who valued that coziness. Your job felt fulfilling because you were someone who needed that validation. Your relationships felt deep because you were someone who craved that connection. But if those needs have changed, if those values have evolved, then the places that once held you will start to feel too small. This isn't about the place being wrong. It's about you having grown. And growth is disorienting, because it doesn't happen all at once. It happens in pieces. A shift here, a realization there, a quiet moment when you notice that what used to excite you now exhausts you. What used to fulfill you now feels empty. What used to matter now feels trivial. And the hardest part is that no one else sees it. To them, you're the same. To them, nothing has changed. But to you, everything has. You're walking through a life that looks exactly the same on the outside, but feels completely different on the inside. Ibn Arabi said this is the loneliest stage of transformation, because you're changing in a world that expects you to stay the same. You sit in your living room, the same couch you've sat on 100 times, the same view out the window, the same sounds. But tonight, it feels like you're somewhere else. Not physically, but spiritually. Like your soul is already halfway out the door, and your body is just catching up. This feeling, this sacred strangeness, it's not a sign that you're broken. It's a sign that you're waking up to the fact that life isn't static, that you aren't static, that the version of you who built this life, who chose these places, who made these commitments, that version served its purpose. And now, quietly, gently, it's stepping aside. Ibn Arabi called this the threshold moment, the moment between who you were and who you're becoming. And standing on that threshold is uncomfortable, because you can't go back. The old life no longer fits. But you can't move forward either, because the new life hasn't fully formed yet. So you wait, in the strangeness, in the discomfort, in the in-between, and the places you once loved become witnesses to this waiting. They hold the memory of who you were. They reflect back the version of you that no longer exists. And that's why they feel strange. Not because they've changed, but because they're reminders of a self you've already outgrown. The question isn't whether you'll leave. The question is whether you'll honor the process, whether you'll give yourself permission to feel the strangeness without shame, to acknowledge that transformation is messy. That growth is disorienting. That becoming who you're meant to be often requires letting go of who you've been. Ibn Arabi said that the soul knows the way. It knows when it's time to move, when it's time to release, when it's time to step into something new, even if that something is still unclear. The strangeness is the signal. The discomfort is the invitation. And the familiar turning foreign is the soul's quiet way of saying, it's time. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to know what's next. You just have to honor what is. The truth that the life you're living no longer feels like yours. The truth that the places you loved no longer hold you. The truth that you've changed and everything else is catching up. And maybe that's enough. Maybe the strangeness isn't something to fix. Maybe it's something to trust. A compass pointing you toward a life that actually fits the person you've become. Not the person you were. Not the person others expect. But the one you're quietly, slowly, courageously becoming. Ibn Arabi would tell you this. When the familiar becomes strange, don't fight it. Don't force yourself back into a life that no longer fits. Instead, breathe, notice, feel, and know that what's ending is making space for what's beginning. Even if you can't see it yet, even if it terrifies you, even if no one else understands, the strangeness is sacred, and you, standing in the middle of it, are exactly where you're meant to be.